And it's a lot of the young ones as well. Yeah, I'm going to get into property because I don't have to work a 9 to 5. I can go to Nando's at 12 o'clock if I want to go to Nando's. I can take Friday off if I don't want to take Friday off. Yeah, you can do when you're about 10, 15 years into the business and it's established. By all means, do what you want. Be careful who you trust because not everybody has the best intentions for you. People buy from people. Go in, make a relationship with them, start talking to them, start communicating. It's all about building your pipeline up.
Do you think property investment is for everyone? Welcome back to the Mindful Creator podcast, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. If you're loving the episodes and if you're loving the guests, then please make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a single episode. Also, make sure you comment below with your favorite part of the episode or the part that impacted you the most from the conversation, because I absolutely love hearing how the conversations are making a difference for you. Your interaction and engagement is what helps me make this podcast that much bigger and better, with even more amazing guests and even more powerful conversations. None of this would be possible without you. So again, I'm hugely grateful. Thank you so much. And let's get into the show. My guest today is Ravi Gore. Ravi is a property investor, a mentor, and an accredited property educator. I'm not going to lie, I didn't even know that you could become an accredited property educator. He's been actively investing for over 13 years and still does to this day, which started off with rent to rent. And as a result of the rent to rent success, he's amassed a growing portfolio of properties that he owns as well. And also, I would like to say, I remember you telling me this before we spoke, actually, that you were on rent to rent before rent to rent even became a popular strategy. So I'm super excited to get into that today. And also, what is amazing is that you're mentoring people to create their own portfolios, to build their own legacy, and to build their own generational wealth. Ravi, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, bro. So look, obviously you're in property. We're going to be talking a lot about property. I want to know a little bit about Ravi before property became a thing. So what was Ravi like before you became who you see today?
Before Ravi, well, I was actually cricket mad. So my thing was always cricket. It was cricket, 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 cricket. I used to go to India every Christmas to train, to learn to become pro. Unfortunately, that journey didn't happen. And as a result of it, I started to take school a little bit more serious when I knew I wasn't going to get there.
Wow, I had no idea about cricket.
So yeah, I used to train at some quite high up places. There's a stadium in Mumbai called the Brabourne Stadium, which is India's equivalent to the Lord's cricket ground here in the UK.
So prestigious.
It's a very prestigious ground. And that was home for 10 days at Christmas every year for about 5 or 6 years. And that was who I was before. Everything was about cricket, was about cars. My dad comes from quite a large business. We own a car body shop. Previously, of BMW's own body shop themselves. So I've always been around that sort of side of business in terms of it. And yeah, that's where Ravi's journey started, really.
That's interesting. So what made little Rav so passionate about cricket?
I tell you what it was. When I was at school, and I remember this game vividly. It was 1999. It was Sourav Ganguly made 183 versus Sri Lanka. And I don't know what happened. I wouldn't say I was big on cricket before. I was always, was always at school. It was always football, cricket, rugby, whatever it was. But it was something. And I always remember that at school they allowed us to watch that game. And that was the first time that something like that had ever happened, because usually it was like, no, you can't watch it. You got to go to class.
I was gonna say, it's a big game if school's going. Do you know what, guys? Let's all watch a cricket match.
Yeah, exactly right. And I just fell in love with the game ever since. And from there, and even today, I'm back playing now. So I'm back playing Saturday leagues. Just love the game. Just everything about it. Just I'm nuts about it, really.
Amazing. Yeah. So you were actually in quite intensive training for cricket for quite a significant part of your life, I'd say. And I think with any sport that you do to a high level, you end up getting a lot of training from that. Mm-hmm. What were some of the biggest learnings that you had because of cricket that you actually utilize today in your business life?
I think the biggest takeaway from it was nothing is guaranteed. So even though I was going to these courses, these training centers, the mindset, nothing was going to get handed to you on the plate. The minute you entered the ground, and I'm talking about some high up senior profile coaches, you were absolutely nothing in front of them. You may have been the best batsman in the nets for the last 15, 20 minutes, but you then got to go back and do more drills. And the realization came in when I was in it, because it was in Mumbai in India, and you see some of those kids who have come from nothing, and they're at the ground at 5 a.m. on the dot. They're ready to train. They will be there until 9 p.m. at night when the center closes, and they're giving, they're dedicating life to it just to get where they need to be today. The dedication is immense. And I remember a second trip when I went back to Chandigarh, in fact, someone saying to me, we're actually going to go to Yuvraj Singh's dad's house. I said, all right, cool. And we were all excited.
Just a casual trip.
You just think, yeah, it's a casual trip, big whippity do. And I actually got up there and he said, look, you're more than welcome to come and have a chat with me, but I'm training somebody. And he wasn't actually a player who's played IPL for Punjab. And I'm talking, this is like 9 p.m. at night. And he's put floodlights on in upstairs roof of his house. And he's throwing these it's almost like table tennis balls, but they're quite solid and hard. And he's just pinging it. And the commitment level this kid had at the time, it was Manan Vora. The level that he had at 9 p.m. at night, and I'm talking the balls coming down at him like 70 miles an hour. He must have been about 13, 14 at the time. Pitch black, 2 floodlights put on. The commitment he's gone through, his parents have gone through to facilitate that, kind of got me that mindset that if wherever I had to go, whether it's 9 a.m. or it's 9 p.m., you've got to put the hours in to get where you kind of need to be and where you want to be in life.
Training for greatness, basically.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hey.
If you don't put the hours in, you're not going to get anything.
The purpose of this podcast is to help you make your dreams a reality in every area of life. And that includes traveling and exploring some of the world's most beautiful destinations, like the Maldives. Myself and my wife took a trip to the Maldives last year, and with the huge number of islands to choose from and the cost differences between all of them, it all became a little bit overwhelming. That's where Simply Maldives, a dedicated travel agency for all the islands, stepped in, gave us the best advice, helped us plan our perfect trip, and got us a fantastic deal. That's why I'm proud and excited to say that I'm now partnered with Simply Maldives. Their expert knowledge can help you plan the perfect dream holiday. Whether you're traveling solo, traveling as a couple, traveling with your family and kids, or you have specific dietary requirements, they have something for you. So if you're interested in jetting off to the Maldives for your next dream holiday, then reach out to Simply Maldives through the link below, and I can guarantee you'll be well looked after. You're a property mentor.
Yeah.
You are a property investor.
Yes.
You're both, you're not one or the other. And I love that about what you do anyway, because you're doing the work and teaching people along the journey. So you're kind of giving the best up-to-date learnings that anyone could ask for.
Mm-hmm.
And what I really want to use this session for as well, for this recording, is having the listener in mind who is super interested in property, really wanting to get into the game because they've seen the success that people talk about all day, every day on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube. And with them in mind, give them the absolute best value of what it takes to succeed in this game, what things they need to look out for, and essentially what the best training structure would be for them to succeed.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Why not? Let's do it.
Cool. So let's start with strategy. Okay. Someone looking to get into property, is there, or would you ever say that there is the best strategy for someone to work towards? And how would they even go about starting, understanding where they needed to start to get involved in the property game?
I think before you start having a look at what's the best strategy, I think the first thing you need to have a look at is yourself. You need to have a look at you need to have a look at your finances, you need to have a look at your life perspective. And then when you break down those kind of thoughts and processes, that will lead you to the path of where you want to go. So for example, if you're coming to me and you're saying, Ravi, I've got 50 to 100 grand in my bank account, I'm probably not going to tell you to go towards rent, because you've got the cash flow in your account, which will allow you to then go and purchase property so you can start building that generational wealth. However, if you're on the other side of the spectrum where you don't have enough money or you want to look to build that sort of equity up, then I would sort of say to you, right, we need to start looking at rent to rent or even potentially deal sourcing, which will allow you to build that income up. I think the problem I have in today's world is everybody dives onto YouTube, or they go onto Instagram, or they go onto TikTok, and they see Rav Gore's doing something or so-and-so is doing something, and that's the best strategy going. It's the best strategy going for me because of my situation and where I was and where I'm planning to go to. You've got to look at yourself, and it's quite a selfish perspective, because it has to be selfish. This is about you. It's not about me. It's not about anybody else. It's about where you want to go in your journey. So if you're looking at yourself and thinking, I really want to get into property, but I've got 100K in the bank account, right, we need to probably look towards like HMOs or the commercial sort of side of stuff where it's going to be a little bit more work, but you've got the money in the bank. If you don't have the money, then we need to look at other little steps to kind of get you to where you need to be. I think the other thing that most people need to do, especially when they want to get into property, is don't look at it as an aspect of I want to get into property. Look at this as where am I going to use this to go to my next level? So, for example, one of the questions I always ask anyone that comes on a sales call with me is, where do you want to go with this? Why are we doing this? I don't want it to be a case of me and you sitting on a weekly call because you're telling me you saw your best friend down the pub and he was telling you what he's doing service accommodation, and now you want to start it, because I'm going to have to cut the call here because you're not the type of clientele I want to work with. My philosophy is you need to have a bigger picture in mind. So, for example, if you're someone like myself, we've got young kids, we need to obviously look for their future. I need to build for them. So I would then, if I was in your shoes, I'd look to use a rent-to-rent strategy if I was looking to create funds, which would then allow me to then in the future build a pot of funds at which I can then go and use as investment for buying property, which will create me generational wealth. That's the way you got to look at it.
Do you think property investment is for everyone?
Is property investment? Property investment isn't for the faint-hearted, and I've said that a few times on a few of my Instagram videos. I think it can be for everybody, but I think you have to understand the processes which comes with property investment. There are a lot more knocks than there are kind of pros to it. You're going to be knocked down a hell of a lot of time. You're going to be no's are going to be said to you a lot of the time. But I think if you're willing to grind and if you're willing to put the work in and you really want to do this wholeheartedly, then absolutely. What I would suggest people not to do is don't do it just because it's something that looks great on TV or someone's doing something and you think, wow, this looks like a good thing to do, because very, very quickly you'll end up losing a lot of money, because as great as property can be, it can also be a drastic pitfall for somebody.
Why should someone choose property investment over other forms of investment like stocks and shares, or there's trading, there's people could go and set up a business? Like, what's the reason why property has such a high level of potential upside for people?
Yeah, I think the worst thing that can happen in property, if you look at it from a negative perspective, is even if you bought a property and you didn't, for whatever reason, didn't have the funds to kind of uplift the property, the value of it, you can still sell it for the value that you bought it at. Very rarely are you going to sell it at a loss unless something drastic happened like COVID or there's been a massive disaster in the property. You'll always be able to cut your losses of where you kind of purchased it with. The good thing with property is it's bricks and mortar. Everybody needs a home. There'll always be a special tenant type which you can cater for. Stocks are great. Crypto can be great. The problem I have with it, it's up and down. It peaks and troughs. Property, yes, even though we're going through a period of time now in the country where interest rates are quite high and people are going like that, but there are still strategies out there which you can still go and buy properties, like for example the HMO strategy, which if you're buying it at a HMO level, it doesn't matter if the interest rate's a little bit higher. What you're earning from your tenant rental income, you're going to overcome it anyway. So I think it will allow you to build that generational wealth, and it gives you that kind of pathway to get where you need to be. Where I think sometimes when stocks and crypto, there's not always that vision yet. Can I see myself doing this in the next 10, 15 years? Or am I going to make a quick buck now? Whereas property is for the long game. And if you're willing to ride out the waves, if you're willing to go kind of the next 10, 20 years with it, you can roll on, you can make your millions. And then the next nice thing is, and I'm going to get a little bit of heat for this, but you can't really hand over stocks and shares to the next generation as such. Whereas property, if I went and bought 10, 15 properties, I know my two sons are going to be able to enjoy that, because when my time's up on this earth, it's all going to you two. So they've got something to build their futures on. And I think that's the nice thing with property, is it allows you to elevate the next generation as well.
I love that. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the strategies that we've just been speaking about. So you've got SAs, which are serviced accommodation, which is essentially treating your property like you would a hotel, where you rent it out on a nightly rate.
Yep.
You've got rent to rent, where you rent a property from someone else and then you charge an increased rent for that property and you make the profit in the difference. HMOs, which is multiple people living under one roof. And those are the three typical strategies that you talk about.
So let me break it down. We'll stop you right there, because this is the massive misconception everyone has. So rent to rent
I'm so glad you're breaking this down.
No. So rent to rent is a strategy. And I'll tell you what, this is the one thing I say to everybody. If you remember at school, when we had to do like the spider diagram, so you had to put the word in the middle and you had to put the circle around it.
Yeah.
And then you had the several arms off it. So the word in the middle here is rent to rent. So rent to rent is our strategy. Then one arm that comes off rent to rent is service accommodation.
Okay.
Another arm comes off it is HMO. Another arm you can have off it is social housing. Another arm you can have of it is something called back-to-back rent-to-rent, which is in essence what you've just said, what rent-to-rent was.
Okay.
And then deal packaging comes off it as well. So rent-to-rent is our strategy, because whether it's service accommodation, whether it's HMO, whether it's social housing, the basics are still the same. We're still renting it on from the landlord to then re-rent it out, depending on which other strategy we look to go towards.
Interesting. I had no idea you could do all of those under the same strategy.
Rent-to-rent is the house, put it that way. And then service accommodation, HMO, social housing, they're all the kind of tenants within it.
Interesting. Okay. So, first thing I want to touch on is service accommodation and rent to rent sound amazing because they have a low cost requirement to actually get into the strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're going to buy a house, you have to have a 25% deposit. If you look at the average house price, not in London, so let's go outside of London, up north. If you're looking at 150 to 200 grand for a property,
Yep.
you're going to need, let's assume there's some refurb work, etc. You're going to need about 50, 60K just to get started.
Yep.
Okay. Whereas with rent to rent as an overarching strategy, you're going to need a couple of £1,000s to get the rental flow going. Mm-hmm. So the cost of entry is much lower. However, I know personally some people who've been sold the idea that the rent to rent is definitely the way to go. The cash flow is amazing. And as a result of that, have been burnt month on month because they're always out of pocket.
Yep.
Why has it worked for you?
I think the one thing that so let me take you back a little bit. So when I first started property back in 2009, when I was saying to you, we then termed it let to let. Mm-hmm. The rent to rent wasn't a thing. It was L to L is what we used to
I remember you telling me this before we jumped on this.
Yeah, so this is what it was called then. And everyone's like, what's let to let? The thing with it is, and even going back then, and even when I actually going forward a little bit, I sourced a business mentor who, funny enough, also did rent to rent at that time. One of the things that we always talked about was you have to be absolutely pedantic about your tenant types. The massive misconception people have today, especially when service accommodation, and this is where they make more mistakes, is with service accommodation, you get mainly two types of tenant. You get your leisure guests and then you get your business guests. The problem people have with it is they just go and take a property on and they're happy to do it because it might be like in a central location. Fantastic, no problems at all. What they haven't dialed in is have a look at the tenant type. What is a demographic of the tenant types? What kind of demands are in the areas? And one of the things that we nailed, and one of the things we absolutely are anal on even today to make sure we get right, is even if we're taking a property on, who is our target clientele? Is it the business industry? Are we looking at the leisure guests? Are we looking at contractors? Who is our tenant types? We're not just going to 100% go with them, but we know that's going to be our main focus of income coming from there. Mm-hmm. Then before we take that property, I'm still like that today when I look at deals, I go through my figures 2 or 3 times. I'll have a look at tenant types. Let me see what kind of demand in there. The biggest problem people have had is it's great to say on now Instagram, because back then Instagram wasn't even a thing. I don't even think Facebook was around when we started. I think it was MySpace, maybe. I might be wrong.
When did you start?
This is going 2009. So Facebook was around.
Facebook was just
launching,
getting traction.
Yeah, but I think putting things like that on there wasn't there, because I remember on Facebook used to put things like Ravi Gore is, and then you could fill in the blank.
Yeah,
and you could say what you're doing. But you'd never put anything about property in it because it wasn't a cool thing to do then, right? But again, it's just people not analyzing what they're doing. You've got to look at your demographics. Mm-hmm. You have to look at who your tenant types are, and you have to look at your numbers. If there's one thing anyone takes away from this podcast today, please, for the love of God, get yourself a calculator, get yourself a rent-to-rent calculator. If you need to, hit me up on Instagram. I'm more than happy to share something with you. Just please do your numbers right, because if you don't dial them in, and even if it's out by a certain percentage, people go with their heart to say, yeah, I can tell so-and-so I've got my first rent-to-rent deal, and we can make it work. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that we made sure we didn't do. And the person I have to kind of, and she'll love me saying this, I have to really congratulate on this, is my wife, because I was that person to say, I want that house, I'm going to have that house, and she's the finance person behind, so she's an accountant by trade.
That's super helpful.
And she was like looking at the penny, she was like, yeah, but this one doesn't make financial sense, and that one, and I'm like, no, I can make it work. And she's like, no, it can't make financial sense because we're going to run out of loss. And had I not listened, had we not gone down that path together, I probably would have had a whole lot of properties that would have burnt my hands. So numbers.
How, obviously you've got your wife there
Yep.
to help you balance the emotional aspect of what you were feeling. I can relate to this, and I can actually feel Chris looking at me.
Energy's
Going,
coming your
yeah,
way. I saw her smile when I said my wife's name. I was like, oh.
She's like, yeah, I know how you feel.
Yeah.
I do the same thing. How have you learned to separate your emotion of like, oh, this could work, and putting that aside to just go, actually, no matter how much I love this property, the numbers just don't make sense. Like, is that just training? Is that just
a little bit of training? And I still see it with a lot of my mentees today. They'll look at a house and some of them will say to me, I've seen this fantastic penthouse apartment, and I'll look at it and I'm like, well, the rent on it's very high, so you're not really going to make a lot of money. Yeah, but it's amazing. It's got floor to ceiling, windows, and it's got amazing, sound system or whatever. But I'm like, I don't really care. I think the one thing that I've always done in one of the things that maybe it's because the way I've been brought up around business, I've always thought it has to be right on the numbers. That's just something that's always dialed in. If you look at a lot of my HMO portfolio, especially in Leicester, a lot of the houses that I've taken on from landlords are probably the ones that you and me probably wouldn't look twice on the right move because you'd be like, I'm not touching that. It's horrible. Mm-hmm. But what that's allowed me to do is A, negotiate a lower rent with them. Mm-hmm. B, that's allowed me to go and put my own touch on it. So, for example, if the standard properties in Leicester would be like magnolia, whitewashed, and then you had very thin carpets, it's allowed me to kind of go in and put my stamp on the properties, my own kind of feature, which allowed me then to uplift my income from those properties. They're still in the locations which I wanted them to be in. So two things I think you've got to like really, really dial in is, number one, you have to go with your head and not your heart. It may be the ugliest house in the street, but if you can put your head on, if you can put your touch on it, if you can think of it in terms of a mathematical situation and make this work, it's the best house on the street. And the second thing, you're going to look at your demographics and you look at your geography. You've got to look like, where's my property located? Just because it's located 10 minutes away from the city centre compared to something which is located 5 minutes within the city centre, it can make a drastic difference.
What would you say is ideal location in that kind of example?
And again, going back to this, so a lot of my properties are situated in Leicester, they are about, I would say they're about a 5 to 10 minute bus ride into town.
Okay.
So even a walk takes you about 20 minutes. But the location which they're situated is a hub for, and I purposely looked at this area because I grew up around it, so I knew it really, really well. And the main tenant types there are young professionals, so people that may be in first or second year jobs, people that are last year students or third years of researchers, or young couples. They are my tenant types, which I'm looking at, and I purposely target that area because I know if I'm targeting a researcher, if I'm targeting somebody who's on his third year, they're not going to mess around with the rent. They're not going to tell me, oh, I haven't got it today because I spent it down the pub, because they know, how crucial it is to make sure they don't get a black mark against their name. Because someone like me, who's been in the industry for a little while, will say, no problems at all, son. And the next thing you know, there's a CCJ hanging on your name.
Yeah.
Because I'm not here to be messed around. I will give you everything you need. I'll give you your foundation. I'll give you your house. I will leave you alone. The only thing I ask for is two things. You respect my property and you pay my rent on time. Everything else I will do for you where I can.
I was going to say, renting to students sounds horrifying because I used to be one and I know what that's like. Yep. But I get the logic here. It's not just your first years, your freshers. You're going for the more mature student, which actually mitigates that risk.
And even internationals, because they're coming over for, especially the ones coming from like Asia and like India and places like that, because they're here for a purpose. They're not here to mess around. They're not here to, and a lot of them actually sometimes come on a bursary. So you actually get the whole year's rent up front, which is ideal for us because I get 12 months rent in my account. I don't have to mess around. I know they're not going to mess around. If they decide to leave halfway through, that's up to them because we've still been paid for it. You just, again, it coming down to identifying your tenant types. You just have to know who your clientele is and who you want to kind of go after. And even if I've had first years and second years in my properties, but if I have got them in, I need to make sure mum and dad are a guarantor. Okay. Or there's a guarantor behind them, because if little Johnny decides to play up, I'm going to be on the blower to mum and dad and said, little Johnny decided he doesn't want to pay rent this month because the carpet is now not to his liking in his room all of a sudden, and he doesn't want to pay rent until I take it out. And they now know that's not a justifiable reason for them not to pay rent. So I think you've got to look at avenues and look at ways in which you can reduce your stress and your limit, and then go towards it. We were all students once. You know what it's like. I know what it's like. Yeah. We all had a good time at uni and did whatever we needed to do. But
I didn't do anything in uni. I didn't.
No, me neither. I was a good boy. I was a good boy. I can promise you that.
Okay, so let's talk some real numbers. Okay, if someone is able to create success on any of these rent-to-rent strategies or any branch of those, and do it well, what kind of numbers do they need to consider going into the deal? and what could someone expect as a return from that deal?
So the very first thing someone needs to do when they want to do rent to rent is set themselves up as a limited company, and you have to become compliant. To do your full compliances along with your company setup will roughly cost you between £1,200 to £1,500 to get going. If you're going to go down the service accommodation deal, the way you have to look at it is every property, doesn't matter whether it's in half decent nick or if it's in poor condition, you still have going to spend some money to bring it up to make it to that hotel sort of standard. So you're looking at between sort of anything between £5,000 to £10,000 as a setup, and that's potentially away from the rent as well.
Okay.
Sometimes, whereas rent to rent HMO is probably a little bit less than that. I'd probably say you're looking at around about £1,500 to £2,000. And the reason with that is when we're doing rent to rent HMO, when we're taking those properties on, there's a rule that says if the property is vacant, a HMO property is vacant, the landlord sometimes has to pay double council tax rate. But if they've got furniture in them, they pay a standard rate council tax rate if it's ever empty. Very unlikely that it is. It's a really strange rule.
I was going to say that's the weirdest rule I've
Somebody
ever
on the
heard.
city council once told me that, and I was like, okay, fine. But it ticked the boxes for me because when I target these properties, before I sign any contract on my second viewing, I go in and make sure that the furniture is up to decent standard. If it is broken, if it is anything wrong with it, I have that chance to have that communication with that landlord there and say, look, the bed's broken in room 3. Can we please get it changed? And you're getting them to do a lot of the work beforehand. All you have to then do at that stage is go in, dress it up, paint it, things white goods, so fridge, freezers if it needs it, kettle, toaster, microwave, cutlery. Your minimal spend, I look to spend on a property and I'm doing it up at max £1,500 to £2,000.
Okay.
It's minimum in maximum out because it's rent to rent, and that's where you got to remember where you don't want to be going in changing bathrooms or kitchens and even carpets to a certain degree. If it's not bad and I can just go and get it washed, it's fine because it's a rent to rent deal. I'm not going to go and spend £2,000 on a new carpet in a property because it doesn't make sense. With service accommodation, you do have to go the extra little mile. You do have to put a little bit more in because again, you're trying to attract more guests kind of coming to your way. Again, I go back to looking at tenant types. So if you're looking at the contractor market, people that are going to be out on the field are going to be out there kind of majority of the day. And I'm not by any means degrading anybody, but you don't have to probably do the same standard if you were sort of say have an apartment in, let's say, St. John's Wood, where clientele is going to be somebody quite high up, where you're going to have to kind of go, the like bougie sort of style in the property to make yourself look out against somebody else. So again, it's just weighing up your tenant types and weighing up your locations.
I guess that also comes down to what kind of price they'd pay, what expectation they'd have based on that pricing as well, right?
Absolutely. So, you could go from anything from £170 to £200 a night on certain properties to then certain other properties which you're charging £85 to £90, again depending where you are. The HMO aspect of it again is a little bit different to that. Whether we do it at a mediocre rate, whether we do it at a higher rate, you can still more or less going to charge that rate for the rooms. The good thing with it is with HMO, the slight difference with service accommodation is when it comes to uplift, there's not a lot more you can do when you're doing rent to rent HMO. It's a completely different ballgame when you're owning property because you can then look at the size, you can look at where you can create extra room. When you've got rent to rent HMO and that's what you're going to kind of have to work with, you have to see where can I add value in this, and that maybe me doing the rooms up a little bit more. Do I add extra things in the kitchen? Do I add extra things in the lounge area? For example, can I put a TV in there with Netflix? I've got a funny story actually. In saying that, I had a 4-bedroom HMO in Leicester. Always worked perfectly. During COVID times, all 4 tenants got on really, really well. I think it was one of the Game of Thrones finales. No, it wasn't Game of Thrones. It was the prequel to it. I can't remember what it's called.
Oh, House of Dragons.
House of Dragons.
Yeah.
And it was a thing now in the house that they'd all get together in somebody's room and watch this episode.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, cool. And I think it was before COVID actually. So what I did actually was we had a spare room in there which wasn't big enough to house as a bedroom. Put some bean bags in there, put television in because it could fit in. A sofa wouldn't fit into it. And the guys loved it. And literally, just doing that small thing kept those guys in that house for a year and a half.
Wow.
Because it just built that camaraderie. They were comfortable in the house. I was comfortable in the house. They were respecting it as their own. I didn't have to worry about, are they going to look after the place? Is it going to be damaged? Is it going to be dirt all over the place?
It felt like home.
It felt like home. It felt like home.
Amazing.
And funnily enough, they were all internationals. So they were from the UK. So
you're definitely consistent in your message.
You have to be. You have to be, yeah.
I love it. Okay, so let's stick with some of those numbers there, and let's use the rent to HMO. So essentially, you're renting a property from a landlord. You're spending up to 5 to 10K in total to do the property up and just make it essentially attractive for someone to want to rent it. What could someone expect? And maybe you've got an example of one of your mentees that's done this. What could you expect for them to get as a return for following through and doing well on that strategy?
So when you're doing rent to rent HMO, the number one rule you have to remember is we need to make a minimum £100 profit per room. So when I'm looking at a deal, if it's a 5-bedroom deal, it has to make me £500 a month. If it's 5 bed, 6 bed minimum for us to even contemplate taking that one. Now, when you put that deal to the calculator, when you're doing it in terms of like what your refurb costs are, any kind of, if you paid a sourcing fee to a sourcer for it, anything that you've had to pay out for in terms of like works and maintenance, we need to break even within a 6 months window. The reason I have for that is even though we sign a 3-year contract sometimes with landlords, there'll always be a 12-month break clause in those properties. So a landlord has the same right as you do if they want to activate that break clause and say, look, sorry, I don't need the property anymore. I don't want you to have the property anymore. At least we've made 6 months worth of profit. And I've seen so many deals where people kind of take it on for like month 9 and month 10, but that's too long a window. A lot of the landlords now sometimes aren't even comfortable with going 3-year contracts and they want you to start on a 12-month contract. Last thing you want to do is go and spend 5 or 10 grand on a property and you're not going to see that money back until month 10 and 11.
Yep.
The landlord then rings you up and sends you a letter through saying they're going to activate the break clause, and you've made 2 months of profit, which you haven't even made your money back on. So it's just making sure your numbers are right. For rent HMO, £100 profit per room, and you need to break even within 6 months.
This is why having a mentor is so helpful.
Absolutely crucial. And I know that because I made those mistakes.
Yeah.
Because when I take it back to 2009, 2010, when I started doing let to let, the philosophy wasn't £100 profit per room. My philosophy was I needed to make more than what my average management was going to be. So an average management on a property back then was about 50 quid.
Okay.
So if I was renting the rooms out, in fact, I'll take you back a little bit. One of the things I did then is when you're young and you're at that age, I think I was about 19, 20, you're eager. You always want to prove people right. I did this and I did that. The problem I had then is I was over-promising to landlords who at the same time knew I was young and I was brash and I was just going to say it. They would dangle a golden carrot and saying, if you rent this 6-bed out, we'll give you the rest of the portfolio. Now, 2009, 2010, what happened was our previous recession.
Yep.
So nobody was going to rent the 6 beds and 7 beds because there was a lot to do. So I had to start renting the rooms out. So the way I did my maths on doing them was I was renting the rooms out. As long as I was making more than my management fee, happy days. So that means I'll be doing work for like 70, 80 quid. And at that time I was like over the moon, happy as Larry, thinking I'm doing a fantastic job. It's only when I sought my mentor and he was like, what the hell are you doing? That's, you're in financial loss here. Because I kept thinking, I'm doing all this work. The landlords are literally like drawing blood from a stone from me. Why am I not making any money on this? And then almost when the penny dropped, it should be £100 profit per room. It was like the aha realization moment where I was like, right, okay. So I've made a massive boohoo here where I could have been making so much more money. And I've literally, dived in blindly to do something. Had I seek the guidance of somebody who knew what they were talking about, I wouldn't have made those mistakes. And every life's a journey, right?
Yeah.
I had to go through those journeys, had to go through those experiences to get me where I am today.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, it's what it's about, right?
Okay, so I'm going to come on to mentors in a second. And before I do, for someone listening to this going, do you know what, this sounds incredible, like I'm passionate about this and I want to follow through. A lot of estate agents have guards up against people wanting to come in, rent a property to then rent it out to someone else. How do you go about finding someone that's going to rent it to you in the way that you have?
I think the first thing and the biggest psychological thing when you talk to like mentees or talk to anybody in general who's struggling to work with agents is they kind of put the agents on a pedestal, like they're this greatest thing ever and they're different from me and you. Look, they're still humans. They still eat breakfast before 9 a.m. possibly. They still want their lunch at 9 o'clock. They still can't wait to clock out of work at 5 p.m. They still celebrate Christmas like me and you do. They still go out and do other things like me and you do. They're human beings. People buy from people. Go in, make a relationship with them, start talking to them, start communicating. It's all about building your pipeline up. The biggest misconception people have is they'll walk into an agency and they will sell from day one. And naturally, an agent, and when somebody came to me in the letting agency and they did that to me, my back's going to be up against the wall. I'm going to be like, whoa, like, hold on a second. You've just walked through the door and you're throwing this whole shebang. And a lot of these guys are scripted. So they'll come in with a script and they'll say, and they'll literally know how to answer the next question back. And the agent knows because there's like 10 of them already that have come in and said the same thing. You've got to go in and make that relationship with the agents. And it's not going to happen the first time around. I've actually had a mentee, Amadip. Amadip has been with me for, I think, the start of December. He's just taken on, with one agent, they've given him an SA deal
Yep.
in Windsor.
Yep.
And they're also about to throw him 2 HMOs in Slough from
Wow.
one agent. From one agent. And he's talked to numerous agents and they've all given him the same positive response, because what he's done differently from everybody else is he's gone and just made that human touch. Hi, I'm Amadip. I'm from so-and-so properties. I'm just in the area. I just sort of come and introduce myself. Or he'd pick up the phone, and he wasn't hard selling them. That's the biggest thing you don't want to do. You don't want to throw it down somebody's throat where, you know, you're kind of like forcing them to kind of do a deal with you. Just let them ease into it. Let them build a bit of rapport with you. Go to the viewing. Have a good friendly chat with them. It's just building that human touch. And I think problem I have today, and it's partly because social media's fault, is people have forgotten that personal touch, that, you know, human side of it. Things. It's almost it's very robotic. It has to be done like this way.
Yeah, and it's gone into that whole instant gratification way of life, which is they're expecting the result now. But as with anything, when you're selling any kind of service or opportunity, or you want something, it takes time, and you've got to build your know, like, and trust. And it's always a long play.
Mm-hmm.
It's always a long play. You never want to expect something short term. If something's super short term and super easy, as the saying goes, easy come, easy go.
Mm-hmm.
You take your time, you build the foundation, you build the relationship, you're going to have something that's more long term, more long lasting, and something that will pay you dividends for, well, years, hopefully.
Absolutely. And that's where you got to look. It's a long term game, as you just said.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Mentors.
Let's hit me.
So you are a mentor.
Yes.
Okay. You've not always been a mentor. You've decided to become a mentor after you've seen the success that you've seen for yourself. Let's start with what makes a good mentor.
What makes a good mentor? Again, going back to my previous, it's that human touch. So the whole point of somebody reaching out to a mentor, wanting to use a mentor, is to get them to the next stage a lot faster by bypassing mistakes. If you've still got a mentor and you're still making the same mistakes you do without them, you've not really got a mentor. A mentor is someone that should be able to guide you to the next stage or get you past those hurdles. So if you think of it as like a marathon running, when people got to jump over those hurdles, your mentor should be that person. As you get into that hurdle, pick you up and put you down towards it, right? And that's the way I've always looked at it. If somebody wants to work with me, it's my job to get them from A to Z, and I have to show them how and what to do it. They can't be sort of getting there thinking, I'm still stuck now, Ravi, I don't know what I'm doing. Ravi, how do I do this? Naturally, there'll be obstacles that come in the way. Naturally, there'll be things that, you know, they didn't expect or I didn't expect. But it's the experience behind you which can allow me to sort of levitate them to the next level. And that's what, for me, makes a great mentor. Someone that can take me from position A to Z and guide me. Just show me a roadmap of where I need to go and hold my hand through that journey. That is what a mentor should be, and that's how a mentor should be working with their mentees.
What's the best and worst advice you've ever had from a mentor?
The best advice I've had from a mentor. Best advice I've had from a mentor is someone that says, if your gut believes it's true, it's going to be true. And I still believe that quite strongly today. So if you've got a gut feeling that something's not right or something is right, or even when you're speaking to somebody, you think, yeah, I can make this work, 9 times out of 10, it will work. The worst advice I've had from a mentor, I wouldn't say I've had bad advice. I would say I've experienced one in particular, I won't mention names, bad mentor who was kind of just there for the money. It was the shiny pennies were there. And it used to be a case of come and see me once a month. Outside of that, I don't want to know you. And as I was saying to you guys earlier on, well, what happens when on Monday morning after I've met you, I have a burning question about a deal that's potentially coming my way? Who do I communicate with? And if I'm a mentee and I need advice, I need help, I need you on the other end of the phone. The way technology is going today, you've got Slack, you've got WhatsApp, you've got iMessage, you've got
You've got unlimited ways to communicate with someone.
Get us on TikTok chat or get on Instagram chat or Facebook chat. There's millions of ways of reaching out to people, right? But it's being that person that you could smell the money on them. They were just like sniffer dogs. Like, okay, it's the end of the month. They're going to pay the next portion.
There's one hell of a
they're
analogy.
They're literally just there. They're ready for you, like next payment, and then they're like best friends with you. And then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, when I needed you last week to answer that question for me, where were you? That's why I would say I think I've I'm quite strong like that. When something doesn't seem right with me, I can't move forward. Um, and as you probably know, I'm quite blunt as well, and I'll call black is black and white is white.
Yep.
And that's just the way you've got to be in business, I think.
You spoke about gut feeling. Okay. How do you differentiate between what's a gut feeling and what just might be thoughts running through your mind?
I think I'm one of those kind of people that when I've got something in my mind and I want to do it, I will damn well make sure I do it. But, and again, this is where Christian was going to smile now. So my kind of having like getting married and my partner coming back, because it allows me to talk to somebody else about it rather than rushing off. Previously, I'd probably rush off and go and do something, and I've made my mistakes. Where now I think sometimes if you talk something through with somebody and let them see it from their perspective, you see it from your perspective, break it down completely. And if that gut feeling is still there after the two of you have had that conversation, or the group of you had that conversation, run with it. Because if there's thoughts in your head and you're still kind of procrastinating over it, then something's not right there, because it's not giving you that, yes, go on, let's go ahead with this, or no, I don't think this is right with you.
That's a good point, actually, because I get a huge wave of clarity once I've had that conversation with Krish, and that allows me to get all the rational stuff out the way. And then I'm kind of looking to see if that feeling's still there.
Yeah.
Like, is that spark still there? Do I still want to do that thing? Do I still want to go ahead with that project? Do we still want to move country? Like, whatever it is that we're talking about, by having that open discussion, it takes away the energy and the charge of trying to rush into something.
Yep.
And it leaves like the essence of that feeling, which I can only describe for me personally as like a little sense of like that little whisper in your ear that's just going, just go for it.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. You've got the same.
It's almost like that the monkey paradox, that monkey on your shoulder. Like, sometimes when you want to do something but you're not sure about it, but then when you speak to somebody, you see because sometimes when you start thinking about things, you kind of put yourself in a box, and all you got to think about is and when somebody else starts to talk to you about it, and you start listening to their perspective, and you think, I didn't actually think about that, or I didn't actually, that's true, I didn't realize that was also an issue. You then break it down a bit further, and just like you said, it helps you to kind of get things off your chest, look at it from a different perspective, look at it from her perspective, look at your perspective. And if we both still want to do this, like you guys moving to Dubai, which I think is absolutely amazing. It's one of my dreams. Mum and Dad, if you're listening, we need to get going.
Yeah.
I think it's just, and like two of you said, yep, we want to do this, and you went ahead with it. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah,
really.
Absolutely. It's amazing. Still shitting ourselves about the whole process, but excited at the same time for sure.
I think you're moving to the greatest state in the country, in the world. Sorry, not the country, in the world.
Well, okay, let's dive into Dubai for a second, right?
Yes.
Because I know that you've actually set yourself up out there as well.
Yes.
Which we spoke about synchronistically a month or two ago now, I think.
It was, before Christmas, I think.
I think just before.
Yeah.
So why are you set up there? And what's your plan out there? Like, what are you looking to do with all the stuff that you've got going on over here in the UK?
So Dubai, when I first went over to Dubai in 2014, I actually went for my stag, funnily enough.
Nice.
Yeah, I know. It was
good memories.
Of all the randomest places we could have gone, it was Dubai. And even then, we were drunk as skunks. We did whatever. It was one of those places that you just felt that there's positivity here. There's a vibe. And in fact, my last trip in 2022, and my wife can account for this, I remember sitting in the pool bar our very last day. I said to my wife, look, I just want to spend some time in the sun. Mum and Dad had come on the trip with us as well. They'd gone back a few days before, sent us a picture of home, and it was just chucking it down. I said, look, it's 40 odd degrees here. I want to sit in the pool bar and just enjoy myself today. At that time, my oldest son was 9 months, so they went upstairs. I'm sat down in the pool bar in our hotel, and there's two American gentlemen, elderly gentlemen from Texas. They just brokered a nearly $1 billion deal between the two of them in nothing but the swimming trunks, 2 pints of beer. They've got a napkin, they've got a pen, and they're just writing this deal down how they want to obviously then get solicitors and legals involved to progress it. That would not happen in the UK. And it was that realization, and there was no hate around that table. Sorry, in that bit, I was listening in awe. I didn't want to move from my spot because I was just listening to dialogue. And it was just that realization that Dubai is one of those places that almost nothing is enough and everything is achievable. So we talk about the American dream, which was previously, which was heard. but I think the United Arab Emirates dream is a lot more powerful.
Dude, I cannot believe you've just said that, because I saw a post from someone on Instagram 2 days ago,
Okay.
and we started following them because they've just moved from the UK to, from the States to Dubai.
Okay.
And the post said exactly those words in the caption, which is, forget the American dream. It's about the Arabian dream.
Yeah.
Which is insane that you've just said the same words, because I've not shared that with you. But it is that feeling.
I think everybody that goes there has that kind of, unless you're going to go there and have a party, which is, and you can have a good time doing that anyway. I've got experience from that. But if you want to go there, and look, when we went last time in a couple of years ago, no, less than that, it was just that mindset that everything is achievable. It was just that mindset that, like, for example, the biggest thing was Saudi Arabia started making murmurs that they're going to make the biggest tower in the world. The minute Dubai has heard that, they've now dwarfed that and made one even bigger.
Yeah.
It's in the plans to go through. It's going to be near the creek where you guys are,
Creek
right?
Tower. Yeah.
So it's just that vision. It's that mentality. So we just thought, right, we have to get ourselves out there. There's something that is allowing us to. By the grace of God, I found some good friends who have helped me out around there. Just very basic things, like we take things for granted, like the electricity bill or the gas bill, and we seem to think it's going to be on a monthly payment, but things are done over there very, very differently.
Yeah, we found that out recently as well.
So it's like, I was thinking, I'll take an apartment out and I'll pay the rent every single month. And people are like, well, if you're going to run it as Airbnb or service accommodation, we need a year's rent up front. And that was a reality shock.
Yeah.
But you then realize your tenant types there are different as well. So for example, one of our target tenant types there are people who are transitioning from the UK or other countries, and they want to become residents of the UAE. And as you know, when you get your UAE permit, it could take anything between 0 to 6 weeks. So you never know. They'll call you on the day and say, right, you're going to come in today to get your paperwork. So our clientele, people that they were probably there for, like, start off with like 5 days, renew for again another 5. And by the time they know it, they've been in there for 5 weeks. It's great for us. It's great for them because they've got stability. By the time they get, their paperwork, we're looking at the next person kind of coming in. Dubai has always allowed us to kind of have that kind of, and by all means, we're not big out there. We're a very, very small company, just doing a little bit here and there. But it's allowed us to kind of have that vision. And like I said, I would love to one day potentially move out there, and that would be home. But even if it's not, it allows me to go there with my kids to kind of, at some point can kind of take over, or they can enjoy the values of it, or they can enjoy not my hard work from it. And that's why we're doing it, right? Is to kind of give them that kind of ultimate life where, and I don't want them to be like spoiled rich kids or anything like that. That's not what I'm alluding to. But what I do want them to do is to sort of sit back and say, you know what, I can chill today because my dad did it and he's allowed me to get to this stage and do what I want. And now I'm going to take it to the next level. And that's always been my vision. And I think my problem with the UK is the UK doesn't have that mindset. And this is something that we spoke about a little bit earlier. The UK is very stuck in, if you're wearing a Rolex, where did you get that from? How can I steal it off you? And you've seen the crime rate, which is going on in London, which is going on around the UK now. It's not safe. You can walk around with your car door open in Dubai, and no one's going to say boo to you. And they'll probably think you're mad because you're overheating the car or whatnot with the heat. Yeah. But it's that mindset we've always loved out there.
I think that's a good point as well, because it's something that happened here in the UK on New Year's Eve. And I remember, like, we were just celebrating at home, and it was a chilled out one, and it was great. And you wake up the next morning and it's the first day of 2024, and the first thing you hear or get the notification of BBC News was stabbing on Primrose Hill for a 16-year-old, which is absolutely terrifying. So I totally resonate with that.
And the thing with it is, right, and I'm quite family orientated. It has to be about the family. So I want to be in a place where my mom, my sister, my niece, my wife, they can walk around at like 10 o'clock in the evening and no one's going to say anything to them. I wouldn't dare let them do that around here in the UK. I'm quite like protective of that. And I still say it to like my mom and dad, like, mom, now, like, shall I go with you? No, leave it. I'll go pick it up, or I'll pick you up, or whatever it might be. Because there's always that, there's always that like inkling in my heart that you can't trust anybody here.
That is crazy, isn't it? Because actually we're all like, have you locked the doors? Have you done this? Have you done that? And I spoke to a couple of my friends who are out in Dubai, and they were talking about where they live and like giving us some advice on like places to look at and stuff. And that was like, their feedback was they never locked their doors.
Yeah.
Which is crazy in
Can you
my
imagine that
eyes.
happening in London?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's just an open invitation to get robbed.
Robbed.
Okay.
Go to Dipsies.
I'm going to move on to some quotes that I found in your socials in a second.
Hit
Okay.
me.
Before I do, how do you, because you mentioned obviously about your sons.
Yep.
You've worked your ass off to be where you are. And I completely agree with you in trying to provide the best life for your future generations to come.
Mm-hmm.
How do you instill into them the mindset and the work ethic that you've gone through, knowing that they're on a potentially better footing than you were when you first started?
I think it comes down to my mum and dad, because dad has a very successful business, so it wasn't as if we lived a good life.
Mm-hmm.
We still do today, but one thing that was never kind of my mum might contest this a little bit, because obviously I used to my passion with cricket bats. We weren't just given things. We weren't just like saying, oh, there's 50 quid, go and do what you like with it. No, if you've taken 50 quid, what are you spending it on? Not to, you're not being like antagonizing, but you've got to learn the value of that money.
Mm-hmm.
And we learned quite quickly, because unfortunately dad's business and my uncle's business, we suffered quite heavily due to no fault of their own. Certain things went wrong, and you quickly learn the value of you can go from here to there very, very quickly. The biggest thing that I will instill, and the biggest thing that kind of drives me and allows me to bear a word, as I probably say, is my faith. I've been through some things that I can't even, we probably have to get another podcast to go through what happened, but my faith in the Almighty has allowed me to be where I am, and that's one thing I need them to be installed in their mind. It's not about the money. It's if you are a good human being, if you believe in God and you live a good, honest way, you will get your due. And one thing that I will always say to them is, they were quite young, yet one's 2 and one's 4 months. Whatever penny is written to you, you will get. I can't get your Dipesh's penny because it's not written for me. I'm not going to go and grab it off you. It's not going to be no value to me. What's written for me, I will get. What's written for you too, you will get. Be honest, be righteous, good human. I just want people to say they're good human beings. As a dad, happy as Larry, they can have what they want then.
Do you believe in destiny?
Do I believe in destiny? Interesting. I believe certain things are written out for you, but I also believe that the pen is still flowing, because it's almost like God will say to you, I'm going to put you in this situation. You can go left or you can go right. If you go left, this is what's written. If you go right, this is what can be written. You chose now, son. Which way do you want to go? And that's what I kind of believe. I think certain things are written out for you. There are certain things that are destined to happen. But I also think that you're kind of given an option left or right. And that's why I said the pen still flows, because if you went left, it's going to flow this way. If you went right, it will flow that way.
I fucking love that.
Yeah.
That's a great definition. I might not air this podcast and just steal that as my own. Nah. Okay. So, did a little dive into your socials and I found 3 quotes that I really liked. Okay. I'll reflect the quote back to you.
I hope I can remember them now.
Yeah. And I'm just curious about your take.
Yep.
Okay. First one. Don't let shiny distractions veer you off your path.
Yes.
Why is that so important?
Because the road to success will be veered with a lot of shiny things that will come your way. They look shiny. They look amazing. They look great. And if I simplify that, I could have £50,000 in my bank account. Do I want to go and put that £50,000 on a down payment for a new BMW M5? Or do I want to go and put that as a down payment on a potential investment property, which will keep giving me return on investment? The shiny car will look a lot better because it'll look great. You driving around in that BMW, fantastic, looks amazing. However, it's also depreciating in value very, very quickly. Whereas if you put that same £50,000 in property, you can grow your generational wealth very quickly with it.
I love that. Your mindset is more than a tool. It's your superpower.
Mindset is everything. And I'm someone that I've struggled with anxiety. And I still to today, I wouldn't say procrastinate. Like anything, when a big deal's coming through, I will sometimes my wife, and bless her, she probably gets the brunt of it. I'm like, this can go wrong and that can go wrong and this can happen and why does this happen? And but if you've got that mindset of like, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna get myself through this, I'm gonna get to the next level, it will be your tool. It can take somebody who's got a lot of experience, somebody's got no experience, to the path where they want to kind of go to.
Amazing. And that just is a massive reflection on how I am most of the time.
We're both the same.
Yeah, 100%. Third thing, becoming an entrepreneur is often misunderstood as a path to not having to work, when in reality the work doesn't stop.
Yeah, and this was aimed at a lot of those people who are new into property, who sort of see things on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, and think, and it's a lot of the young ones. So yeah, I'm going to get into property and I'm going to have my own business because I don't have to work a 9 to 5. I can go to Nando's at 12 o'clock if I want to go to Nando's. I can take Friday off if I don't want it Friday. Yeah, you can do when you're about 10, 15 years into the business and it's established. By all means, do what you want. However, you don't work a 9 to 5 on entrepreneurs. Like last night, I was up to 2 a.m. because I had things to get done because I know I was going to be traveling down to see you today. So I'm punched in, and I was actually at my desk yesterday from 7:30. Then I went back out in the morning, had to go and do a couple of things, came back, and I switched my laptop at 2 o'clock in the morning. That lifestyle, we don't always show it on Instagram, we don't always show it on YouTube, but being an entrepreneur does mean that you're working several hours. There's no set hours. There's no such thing as a lunchtime or a coffee break. You're having that while you're on the phone to people. You're having I've had my lunch while I'm on one-to-one calls with my mentees. It has to happen during the day, and that is the biggest misconception people need to kind of get over. Being an entrepreneur isn't you're not going to sit there in the first few years and just say, yeah, today I'm going to take a month off and spend it in Dubai. We did it in 2022 and a great time, but I've also got a track history of 10 years plus in business that allowed me to. I didn't do it in the first 5 years because I wasn't sustainable.
Amazing. I love that. And I think that's something that definitely needs to be talked about more.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. Okay. Final 4.
Here we go.
Okay. And these can be like a quick answers on these ones. What's the one skill you think is essential for someone to succeed in this world?
Mindset.
I knew you were going to say that.
biggest tool you've got in your life is your brain. So fine tune it.
Love that. What is the most impactful book or movie that's completely changed your perspective on life?
Think and Grow Rich. I actually remember somebody giving it to me and I thought they were bonkers. They kept going on about this Think and Grow Rich nonsense until I opened the page and read it. And I've read it about 50, 60 times since, because every time I read it, I pick something new up from it. So it's an amazing book. And it's not just about property people, anyone in life in general, just that mindset from where you can go from, if you want something that badly, put yourselves in the position to get it and you will eventually achieve it.
Yeah, I love that book, Napoleon Hill. It's
brilliant.
And every single time I read it, I pick up something new.
There you go.
100%. This podcast is called The Mindful Creator. What does being mindful mean to you and how do you practice it?
What is mindful being and how do you practice it? I think being mindful, you be aware of your surroundings. Mindful, you think about what you want to do, how you want to do it, what you need to say to somebody, how you say it. I could have changed the tonality very quickly in this podcast about certain things we've talked about, but it wouldn't have gone, it would have just been negative. And that's not what me and you want to put this podcast out as. We want it to be positive, we want it to be impactful, we want it to help somebody. So I think it's just being aware of your surroundings and just doing what you can do to help somebody else in the next step of their journey.
Love that. Final question. And this is about you and your younger self.
Yes.
So if you could go back to one point in your past to your younger self at any age and give your younger self one piece of advice, what age would you go back to and what would you say?
There's actually two things, if you don't mind me saying it. There's one at 14, which I will go back to, because that was when I was at that critical age of cricket. Had I put 10%, 15% more in, you would have probably seen my name on the IPL. I was at that level. I just didn't. My dad pushed me for the love of God. I just, to be honest, I was too into girls. I'll be completely honest with you.
I love the honesty.
I was at that stage in life. I went to an all-boys school. Next to me was an all-girls school. I was getting female attraction, and my mindset lost. So if I could go back to my 14-year-old self then, I'd probably give myself a slap and say, "Oi, get back on the straight and narrow. Think about where you want to go, because it can lead to like amazing contracts, right? And the next step I'd be when I kind of went into a little bit later on into my lettings journey is be careful who you trust, because not everybody has the best intentions for you. And I learned a very, very harsh lesson in the lettings industry. I thought everybody heart is probably as pure as mine was going to be with them. So you've just got to watch out. Not everybody has your best interest at heart.
How do you tell if someone now has your best interest or not?
I think the actions first and foremost is definitely something that you can pick up on, their vibe. If they are all about, they want to hang around with you because you look great on Instagram, or you drive a nice car, or you're associated with certain people, you know something's not right there, because they only want to be around you because you're associated with somebody else or you have something. But I think, again, it goes down to that gut feeling. When you know something's right, and I think the one thing that I'd probably say is you don't want to tell somebody everything straight away as well. Just hold a little bit back, just see what their actions are, see what their intentions are. And if somebody comes genuinely is pure, I mean, look, it's human nature. Everybody will kind of throw a curveball here and there and do something, right? I think it's just how you react to it. But for me, honesty is the best policy.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I love that last point, because that's been super insightful for me. I'm very much the opposite of that, which is I'll go and tell everyone everything right from the beginning, because I just feel like I just have this blind mindset that everyone's thinking the same way that I'm thinking, when in reality that's not always the case. Absolutely. So big lesson for me there as well. Ravi, thank you so much. Absolute pleasure.
Been a pleasure. Really, really has. And thank you so much for both of you having me on. Really, really enjoyed it.